You are listening to Germantown Community Radio, WRGU 92.9 FM. Welcome to the Jumpstart Philly Real Estate Radio Show, a weekly radio program that spotlights positive real estate development and neighborhood revitalization throughout Philadelphia. I'm your host, Derek Hengemil. Jumpstart Philly is a unique community development program that trains, mentors, networks, and provides funding to aspiring real estate developers in 7 different Philadelphia neighborhoods, including Germantown, where the program was founded. Jumpstart believes that you can do well by doing good and focuses on removing neighborhood blight, scattered site rehab, creating a healthy mix of affordable and market rate housing, and avoiding gentrification through slow, steady growth and keeping wealth local. Interviews are conducted during Jumpstart Germantown's weekly Jumpinar series, held on Monday nights at 7 p.m. with Zoom webinar. And for more information about these events, please check out the events page at jumpstartgermantown.com/events. This week, I'm speaking with Kelsey Lee, a licensed expediter and owner of Philly Kelsey & Co., to speak about the city's permitting system, which is called eCLIPSE, and how aspiring developers can avoid delays and complications when using it. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and be sure to check out the podcast version of this program at jumpstartgermantown.com/media. But I'm going to just formally introduce her tonight. Kelsey Lee is a licensed expediter in the city of Philadelphia and president of her boutique firm, Philly Kelsey & Company. She is part of the 9% of women who work in construction, and she mediates with the city of Philadelphia on behalf of her clients when filing permits for renovations and new construction for both residential and commercial projects. Coupled with her YouTube channel and specialized consulting services for sustainable demolition projects, her goal to educate has led her to speak for a variety of organizations, including Better Than Success, which I'm sure people have heard of, especially in this crowd, HAPCO, and Jumpstart Germantown. I should mention that she was a speaker on a very, very early Jumpinar, probably within the first couple weeks of us switching to the virtual format, from doing them in person at our office. So we're happy to have her back, and I've gotten better as an interview at this point, and I'm sure Kelsey has learned a lot about the eCLIPSE system. So it should be a productive session tonight, and I'll let her finally speak. But welcome, Kelsey. It's great to have you.
Oh, thanks so much, Derek. It's a pleasure to be back. I think everyone has learned a whole heck of a lot since last year. But the transition between in person and digital, yeah, we're kind of still back, it's kind of a weird time right now. So I think, a lot of this information is going to be really helpful to help people kind of just keep pressing forward. I know it's hard when you encounter something so silly and you just can't get past that one step. I hope to alleviate a lot of that frustration during the session tonight.
Great. Awesome. So let's start with, I mentioned your company in your bio there, Philly Kelsey & Company. What do you do, and what's your guys' purpose?
So we're licensed expediters. So I have my own company. I have a YouTube channel. My goal is to educate. I like to say there's nothing that I can do that you can't do. And it's important that we provide access to information. One of the main reasons why we exist is, when you're dealing with a large metropolitan area like Philadelphia, you have a lot of different hands into the equation. And when you're talking about getting permits, which is just a fancy word of saying you're getting approval for your construction project, it's a lot of different departments need to be a part of that approval process. So we connect all those departments together. Think of me as like the runner, whether it's in person or online, tracking the right people down, getting the right information for our clients. I'm sure that most of the people here have figured out for themselves that it really takes getting to the right person to be able to get the right information. So we cut through all of that clutter. We already have those relationships in place, and we know the process, so we can certainly help advise larger projects that have multiple stakeholders, alleviate some of that frustration, because that can definitely be a buzzkill when you're trying to get something done and you have an angry owner or an angry investor who wants answers. So
I I resonate with what you're saying about it's like until you talk to the right person, then it's like there's this huge bottleneck and buildup of questions, and then just one person has like, oh, I had that answer, could have given it to you 10 weeks ago, right?
10 weeks. Yeah. And that's really what a lot of people are seeing. I mean, a minimum of 10 weeks to get some of this stuff resolved. We get resolved in less than a day. So we work with licensing and inspections, the Department of Revenue. I don't like to put myself into that little box because there's a lot of things there that attorneys are better at handling. But when it comes to gathering account information or just even knowing what accounts you have open with the city, we can get that information. And it's interesting. A lot of the clients that we work with will actually provide us the wrong account information. And we're trying to figure out what's going on. Why can't we proceed? We get it for them and we get it right. So
before we start talking about eCLIPSE, like, do you have any idea of how many permits you filed or how many clients you worked with?
Yeah, so I have a huge client base. And this is part of the reason why I got into this, and kind of, I'll explain a little bit more later, but I have personally filed over 150 permits since the beginning of 2020. Which, in the beginning of 2020, we still were, not doing plan submissions digitally. But eCLIPSE was in existence before the shutdown. So, for some things, I did have experience using eCLIPSE before it became the primary method of permitting. But I've been in business for over 2 years now, past the 2-year hump. And my mission is really to make demolition more sustainable and environmentally friendly. And that starts by learning the system, learning how it works, and being a resource to everyone that we work with. So
yeah, that's great. And one thing I want to ask you about is, like, how are you different than a zoning attorney, or a, you hear about people doing their projects working with a zoning attorney. You hear about less frequently people working with an expediter. What's the difference? Is it the same goal or a different process? What's up?
that's a great question. And I would say that in my definition, I work with zoning attorneys all the time. So attorneys, they have an amazing wealth of knowledge, case law, understanding of the legal side of how things work, which is essential when you're doing these larger projects. I mean, the understanding of knowing one code regulation versus another and finding the loopholes can save someone millions of dollars. I mean, the impact is real. What I come in and why I work with attorneys is because I am the doer. So less strategic, more about execution. So finding account information, being proactive, constantly reaching out to the city, not waiting for people to come to us. That's just it. When you're working with the city, you can't sit back and wait. You have to be very aggressive and persistent sometimes with some of these issues. In the beginning, it was all about troubleshooting. So, I like to strategically align my firm with zoning attorneys. We don't, as a firm, handle variances, and that is a business decision. We file zoning permits. We will advise, make recommendations based on how we see their project moving forward. But anything at this point, and this is really just understanding how this works and going through the trials and tribulations of starting your own company. We don't put anything on paper when we see some that there could be a discrepancy, because once you start filing government issue documentation, especially when you're talking about pre-existing conditions, it's irreversible. So we work a lot with the zoning attorneys, and I starting out this company, I interviewed as many as I possibly could to see, who would be a good fit for, my clients, because I knew that I was not going to get involved with the variance process. And that's actually how I started the company. I was working with a zoning attorney. So I was a paralegal when I got licensed. In fact, this attorney sponsored me, and that's how I got involved. I was doing deconstruction consulting at the time, and I still am. And the two pair very nicely together. And but yeah, it's a lot of firms. Most of them have an expediter in house. The larger ones, you may not hear about it because you're talking to the lawyer, but most of them do.
Right. So now this is where the topic of tonight's Jump in Our comes into play, because I'm sure there's a lot of developers in this call, or people, people who will be event developers in the near future, don't have the resources to, either hire an expediter or, have a team dedicated to the permitting process. And they really got to know how to interact with the eCLIPSE system hands on. And I bet there's some people in this call who probably don't even know what eCLIPSE is. And they're like, what are they talking about, eCLIPSE? But for those people, and just so we can start from the same point of understanding, what is eCLIPSE, and what is it used for?
eCLIPSE is, well, the government loves its acronyms, so every letter stands for something. So eCLIPSE, in short, it's the Electronic Commercial Licensing and Inspections Permitting Software Enterprise. So it's a fancy saying, it's a fancy thing for basically all encompassing. One of the major, I guess, points of feedback for just L&I, working with L&I in general, is just not having transparency and where they are at in the project. A lot of the permits, and I'll go into this later, but there are still some permits required to be filed in person. But the goal of eCLIPSE is to really be a self-serving tool. And it's meant for everyone. If you are a contractor, you're someone who performing inspections or as part of the special inspections program, you're an agency that gets licensed. You name it, you have to have eCLIPSE, and it has to be functioning correctly. And I'll go into some of that a little bit later, because I can tell you right away if your eCLIPSE is going to work or not, just based on answer to one question. But yeah, that is what it is.
So, and it's really, any and all permits that you need to be obtained from the city of Philadelphia, you need to go through it. Like, is there any exceptions? Is there, what would you say is the most common? Well, I guess there is no.
Yeah. No, it's so we have to follow the code, obviously. And so we are instructed to do certain things, and we follow those guidelines that have been established by the department. One of the major roles that we fill is ensuring that the owner has access to all of their documentation, and that is per code. So whether that entails owner authorization, because we do deal with tenants of commercial spaces, that actually comes more into play, owner authorization. And you often have a property management company, you have to get the proper authorizations, but it's really important that you have that the owner can access those documents remotely on your end. And the way that we ensure that, in addition to keeping very good record, is by manually adding them to the permit. So when that happens, the permit they would get an automatic do not reply email from eCLIPSE prompting them to create an eCLIPSE account. So whether you want it or not, you have an account established, and it all goes based on your email associated to your tax account. So whether you created it 20 years ago or just last week, that is the email address that syncs up all of the different departments. Okay. So if you're an LLC, we'll get to that. It's a little bit more challenging.
And you mentioned that it was around just before the pandemic. That was kind of when it was conceived. What was, just so people have an understanding of what the system replaced, what was it like before eCLIPSE? Was there a different system, or did you have to go down to Center City and do it physically?
Physically do everything. So I actually didn't do any easy permits on eCLIPSE before the shutdown because it's just easier to do in person. It's quicker. I mean, and it still is that way with a lot of the easy permits.
If you're just tuning in, this is a conversation with Kelsey Lee, a licensed expediter and owner of Philly Kelsey & Co., to speak about the city's permitting system called eCLIPSE and how aspiring developers can avoid delays and complications when using it. Thank you for listening to the Jumpstart Philly Real Estate Radio Show on Germantown Community Radio, WRGU 92.9 FM. I hope you're enjoying the discussion. All of eCLIPSE's only use prior to the pandemic was just easy permits?
I believe so. I mean, like I said, I didn't use easy permits filing, but I did licensing, like assembly, certificate of occupancy, I did through eCLIPSE. Anything without plans, you essentially could do if it was available at that time. But, you know, when the pandemic happened and everyone was forced on there, no one knew that you needed to connect the commercial activity license that connected your tax account that allowed you to actually use eCLIPSE. So when I first got involved, I mean, I had clients, I had people to answer to, and I just started my firm like less than a year ago at that point. So I figured it out and I got very good at it. And I learned some really weird, scary things about this program in doing so. But yeah, no, before, the way that it would work is you go down to MSB, you apply for the permit, and if they needed additional information, so if it wasn't an easy permit, and even still, there was a question about whether the contractor was compliant on their taxes. So if you didn't get a same day permit, you would get like an RFI letter, and that letter would be in PDF format signed by the examiner, and then you would respond to it. You would drop off the package or whatever it is. You would put it in the drop bin, and everything had to be in there before 2 p.m. and to be counted on the same day. Right. And a lot of these rules still apply. And this is something that I want to make sure that people are aware of, is that just because eCLIPSE is accessible 24/7, it doesn't mean people are on it 24/7. And in the digital age, in this world, it's very easy to kind of fall into that trap. And it can lead to a lot of frustration. But in this way, it's not a formal PDF anymore. But what I do as a firm, because you're talking about communication, there's simple measures of communication that just fundamentally have to happen. And when you have a large, complex project, what I'll do is I'll actually extract all of the examiner's comments from the PDF document that you download from eCLIPSE. Right. You can use only Adobe Reader to do it. But when you're dealing with a huge project with 30, 40 pages of plans, it's really convenient for the people that hire me to see everything in one document like they did before eCLIPSE. And it works every time. And I mean, and that's one really solid advice, a point of advice that I can give to everyone listening is download it, submit it as a letter. If you have a lot of comments or a lot of responses, they allow you to do that. Do not use that little comment feature at the bottom to note everything and respond. And it's very confusing for anyone, no matter how experienced you are. It is incredibly confusing. Make it nice, make it easy for the examiner to quickly look at it, understand that all of his comments have been addressed, so we can move on. And then you have way less communication issues, way less back and forth. Because every single time, you guys, that you submit that button, you go back into the waiting pool. And that is just the way it is. So if there's things that you can do in advance of submitting that button, you need questions or clarification, you contact someone like myself, join my Patreon, I'll send you a link. You figure out the link, you can request a meeting with an examiner specifically. And a lot of people don't even know this. But I mean, there's ways of doing things that are the proper protocol. There's also things that happen behind the scenes where people like myself will come in, uploading documents, them not being accepted, an error screen keeps getting generated. There's a reason for everything. eCLIPSE actually just made an update. I don't know if, depending on what browser you use, but there's a little help chat icon now.
Does it go right to your phone, Kelsey? Are you just constantly on?
Oh, I'm on eCLIPSE all day, every day. I literally, I've been keeping tabs on every change, especially in the beginning that eCLIPSE had. And the evolution is actually pretty impressive. The amount of capabilities that it can offer now is very impressive from where they came from last year. But it's constantly changing every single day.
So when for somebody who hasn't ever gone on Eclipse or has an account and they don't even know they have an account, like you said,
Yeah.
yeah, when are they first going to encounter Eclipse in their development process? When they they find a or they source a property that they're going to do a rehab on, they find financing and they get construction started, and when are they really going to have that first encounter with Eclipse?
When they get their deed e-recorded, City Hall. So when you open up your tax account with Philadelphia, that is the moment that you want to get prepared and get used to using eCLIPSE. Like I said, when you're an LLC, you have to make sure that all of your commercial activity licenses are manually added into your account. That is the only way that you're going to be able, even if you're not doing any renovations work, that's the only way that you're going to be able to get a rental license. And you have to make sure that all of your LLCs are connected. And this is one of the most frustrating parts, I would say, for a lot of investors. Is it should be so simple, and it's not. And it really just stems back to how your accounts are set up with the Department of Revenue. And a lot of people forget that. So when you're dealing with licensing and you're dealing with the commercial activity license and you're not seeing the property showing up on your account, don't contact 311. They're not going to be able to help you. Contact the Department of Revenue. Start with the tax clearance department, and you can email them. We just go down to tax clearance. You don't need an appointment at MSB to go to the tax clearance unit, and they will be able to give you all of the information you need to access your account with the Department of Revenue online. And this is helpful when you go to pay your property taxes. So again, it all works together. But you're talking about a lot of different departments and one tiny little software. So oftentimes what I'll say is, look, like, I am an advocate for my clients, but I'm also an advocate for contacting the right people for the type of inquiry. And oftentimes that point of contact is the examiner, and these examiners are getting overloaded with inquiries that has nothing to do with their job, because it's related to tax clearance, and that's Department of Revenue, or it's related to the health department. And I don't know if people even know this, but when you're doing health department requirements as related to the construction project, they have their own subset of requirements. Just because you're putting it into eCLIPSE doesn't mean you're done. The job is done. That's just what the Department of Licensing and Inspection enforces, but the Department of Health has a completely separate portal, as do the Streets Department. One thing in the beginning that was really frustrating was when you have any kind of right-of-way encroachment, you have to get that approval from Streets. And I've done it every which way. I've been like, I'm fed up with eCLIPSE. I'm going to do all my prerequisite approvals before I even submit it online. And honestly, that is the best way you can do it, is get all of your Department of Reviews done in advance, put it in through eCLIPSE, be a bada bing, bada boom, you're done. But people put everything into Eclipse, and what happens is it just bottlenecks.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
yeah.
so yeah, my next question is about like you mentioned that there's a lot of different departments and a lot of moving pieces. You know, people from streets and the health department, and I'm sure countless others that they don't all know the ins and outs of the project, and they might not know what's happening. You know, that they're not inside your planning meetings with your team. Um, so what I guess what I'm asking is like, what does the person using Eclipse hope, you know, it would be the developer when they're going in to put their permits in, like how important is it for them to know what those permits are for, or you know what their place is in their project? I have a feeling the answer is going to be that they really need to know the ins and outs of it. But I just want to take a look at that from the perspective of somebody who's not, you know, the contractor of their project, and they're just, you know, they're hiring a general contractor who knows what permits need to get pulled and whatnot. Like what should that relationship look like in your ideal world, Kelsey?
So there are resources for everything. They may not be easy to find, but they are out there. And I'm going to switch to screen share real quick because I want to show you guys something. As an owner of the property, yeah, you do need to know what type of permit you're pulling. In terms of lending, you know, you have the four units and above is considered commercial. Well, in Philly, it's 3 units and above. And unless you knew that, you would be pulling a residential permit when you actually needed to pull a commercial permit. Right. So it's nuances like that. But I'm going to switch over here because this is going to be really helpful for you guys.
Totally.
All right, screen share. All right.
I think it should be, yep, there you go.
There we go. All right. So this is the Jotform. I have it saved on my browser. If you, I wish that I had a short link for this, but you can always contact me, or I can, you know, throw it in the group. It's also available on the resources page, but you know, stuff is really difficult to find on that website. It just is. And this is one of the reasons why I started my Patreon, is because I want to have a dedicated chat group to assist people with these types of questions immediately. But what you'll do is you'll go to a code or permit processing question. So if you're an owner of the property, you need to file a permit. This is a really great way to make sure that you're filing the correct permit. Click no, because if you click yes, it'll say you're using the wrong form. See, yes, please return, select a different option. And
we could even just take a quick step back. What is Jotform? Is Jotform just like a link on the page that it's like a Google form kind of thing, I guess?
Yeah, it's the city's inquiry system. So when the shutdown happened, no one could get in. There were, you know, 5-hour wait times, or you couldn't even get in touch with anyone at all. So this was a solution to that. So fill it out. And then, you know, select the category of the question. They make it really simple. If it's specific to a code, like if you're an architect doing this, like you can put, you know, just to help them answer completely. And then you describe your question. So say what you're going to do. Say, you know, it's this is the property address. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. I need to know the right permit. That's it. They're really responsive to this particular inquiry form. Now, frankly, see you guys, there's multiple drop downs. It doesn't all go to the same person. In fact, these got routed to completely separate departments. So this particular code and processing question, I know, is quick. I mean, within an hour or two, I'll usually get a response to this. But when you have a permit or inspection issue, you know, I would leave at least, you know, 2 to 3 business days to get a response to that particular inquiry. When it comes to permitting inspections issue, we actually don't use this form unless there's a hole that clearly was not the fault of us. It was the fault of the city, which happens a lot still. We normally will just go down, and our office is located at 16th and Market for that reason. We're there quite often. Uh, so yeah, that's something that would be really, really helpful for owners trying to figure it out because, and it's a financial issue, a financial stake in using this form as well, because if you file the incorrect permit, if it's a commercial property, you've lost that $100 non-refundable filing fee. And with residential, up to 1 to 2 units, it's 25. And those are your most common applications, but sometimes you get into other applications like, you can actually request a dedicated review in advance. That one's like $365. I actually mistakenly did that last year. And they do have a resource for getting your money back, but it's all contingent on the person reviewing it, like everything.
So are there any penalties for filing a residential permit incorrectly, or just for that? You mentioned that you get like $100 incorrect or the non-refundable fee you pay for commercial. Like, can that same situation happen in residential permits?
Oh yeah, and it's $25 with residential. Yeah, so when you file something, you have to pay in order to submit it. So it's the same way that it was before filing and permitting filing on eCLIPSE. So it's just a different method, and they accept credit cards now, which before they did not. So
right. So the more you know about your construction, the more you know how to use that little Jotform portal you said, the more or the less risk there is that you're going to be digging yourself in a hole for filing permits and waiting that time without knowing if it's the right thing or not. It's a good tip. And that concludes my conversation with Kelsey Lee, a licensed expediter and owner of Philly Kelsey & Co., speaking about the city's permitting system called eCLIPSE and how aspiring developers can avoid delays and complications when using it. The interviews on this program are recorded during Jumpstart Germantown's weekly Jumpinar series, which takes place via Zoom webinar every Monday night at 7 p.m. And if you'd like to participate in the live Q&A with our guests, be sure to head to jumpstartgermantown.com/events and register for next week's Jumpinar. If you're interested in starting a Jumpstart program in your own community, you can visit gojumpstart.org and see our how-to guide and open source training workbook. Thank you so much for listening to the Jumpstart Philly Real Estate Radio Show on Germantown Community Radio, WRGU 92.9 FM, and be sure to tune in next week.